Today is Tuesday, January 11th, 2011, and my name is MROHP. I'm interviewing Sue Anderson, who is a member of the League of Women Voters of Boulder County and a past president of the League. The interview is being recorded for the Maria Rogers Oral History Program. The interview is being filmed by Emily Schuster. Well, here we are, Sue. I'm going to start with my typical first question. State your name and date of birth.
Okay, I'm Sue Anderson, and I was born on July 13th, 1939.
Where were you born?
Oh, I was born in St. Clair, Michigan.
Clearly, you're not a Boulder native. When did you come to Boulder?
Well, the first time we came was in 1990, and then we actually came back to live in 1992.
Generally speaking, what did you experience and observe about Boulder's community life when you moved here?
Well, before we moved here in 1990, well, before 1990 even, we subscribed to the camera just to see what the town was like and get a feel for it. And we realized that it was a very civically active community, I would say, which is what we wanted. So
you were engaging with Boulder's life even before you got here. That's
and we wanted to know if there were any big problems in town and, you know, that kind of thing. So, and we didn't find any, so here we are.
Well, how and why did you get involved with the League of Women Voters in Boulder?
Well, the reason I got involved in Boulder is because I had been in the League since 1972 in Fairfax County, Virginia. And I joined that league. The first time I went to a league meeting, it was when we have two boys, and they were both very young infants. And I thought, I've got to get out of the house. And so my husband came home from work, and I went to an evening meeting, and I was just overwhelmed. The people there were so intelligent, and I thought, oh my gosh, there is no way I can deal with this. So I didn't do anything. I just went to that one meeting, and that was the end. And then when our youngest went to preschool, I thought, well, there's a day unit. Maybe I'll try that. And so I did, and from then on I was hooked. So, and I guess it was because for me, it was intellectually stimulating. I was still home with children, and I could do as much or as little as I wanted. When the boys were in preschool, I could be home by noon. When they got home, when they got into elementary school, I could be home at 3 o'clock. And I could do more and more in the league as they got older and were more independent. So that's kind of how I started.
Wow, this almost sounds like a career choice.
Yeah, well, it kind of was. Yeah, I looked around the neighborhood and thought, oh my gosh, I'm the only one that's not working. So.
Well, I'm sure your community in Fairfax appreciated that. Could you discuss aspects of your background that might have influenced you to join the League?
Gosh, I'm trying to think. Well, I just wanted to know about the community when we moved, you know, to Fairfax and also to here in Boulder. I wanted to get to know the community and know what was going on, and the League seemed to be a good way to get to know people who were involved in the community and kind of hear what was going on from their perspective. So that's probably why.
So you are kind of a natural community activist.
Yeah, I'm afraid so.
When you got here, since you actually have a point of comparison between two League of Women Voters, did you know anything? Did you notice anything about the Boulder League that was unique or stood out as?
This was a much smaller league than the one I had been in before, but I mean, it was the same. It's the same organization. There are units that meet, you know, all over the area, and it's, you know, if you're in one league, the same people, the same kinds of people join the league as, you know, in Fairfax as did in Boulder. I mean, it was a natural fit. So I don't think there was anything particularly different about this league. It was just about a third the size of the Fairfax League. But other than that, it was about the same.
Could you tell us a little about the mission of the League and how it operates?
Well, the League is a nonpartisan organization, and we basically take, if we take positions, we take positions on issues or ballot issues, but we never take positions on candidates. And we study issues, and the only way we can take a position on a particular issue is if we've studied something similar to that and have a position on it. And then we look at the position carefully and say, all right, does it apply to this ballot issue? Can we support it, oppose it, take no position because we have no position ourselves? So it gives the League a lot of credibility when people say, oh, the League is supporting this issue or the League is opposing this issue, because we've studied it and we're not just jumping off the track, so to speak, to support anything and everything. We've studied it, and we're not afraid to say we don't know, we don't have any position on that, and so we can't take a position. So it gives us a lot of credibility.
How do you go, like, from an idea that a member might have to the actual action?
Okay, that's kind of a long. Well, the League is what we call a grassroots organization, and in fact, this month we're about to have what we call program planning, and it's a local meet. In fact, we're having 2 meetings this year: one in Longmont and one here in Boulder, and people from the whole League can come to either of those meetings, and it's like a brainstorming session. We talk about what our positions currently are. Are there any things that we want to take action or that we're interested in that we don't have positions on that we want to study? And that's how a study begins. And so if enough people really want to study an issue that we don't have a current position, it has to be government related. That's the other thing. It can't just be anything, but it's related to government. And if the group comes to consensus or general agreement that this would be a good topic to study because we don't have a position on it and we feel like we need to be able to take action on it, then we study it. And the study probably lasts maybe a year to 2 years, depending on what it is. And we form a committee, and that committee does the study. Then the committee goes to we have, I believe it's 5 units now, and the committee goes to each of those 5 units and gives a presentation, and then we have what we call consensus questions. And those consensus questions, if the group agrees with them and there is consensus, then we take those consensus questions and write a position based on those consensus questions. So that's kind of, and then once we have a position, then we can take action. So that's kind of how it works.
And let's just follow right through. And then
Okay.
What kinds of actions can be taken?
I guess, well, a couple of things came to mind. One of them at least I have been very involved in campaign finance reform. And we did a petition drive at the state level to get it on the ballot. In fact, 2 petition drives to get it on the ballot. One was a statute and one was a constitutional amendment. And the state league doesn't really believe in putting more things in the state constitution. So the first thing that was done was it was as a statute. Well, we did got it passed by 60-some-odd% of the voters, and the legislature the next year just decimated it. So we had to go back and do a second petition. That was at the state level, and now it's in the Constitution. At the local level, well, the history of it is back when Tom Eldridge first ran for city council. Normally, candidates would spend as much, not more than $10,000. And his campaign, it was a special election, and his campaign raised over $40,000. And there were a group of us, including Mark Rosen, who later became mayor, and I'm trying to think, Alan Feinberg was one, and the League certainly was concerned that this is a small town, and we didn't want to see a lot of big money going into elections. So through a long process, and I won't go into the whole thing, but it took several years of kind of trial and error, and this group met, and Pat Johnson was another one in that group from the League. And we decided that we were kind of doing it on a kind of a volunteer basis, and we thought if we really want this to continue, it needs to be change in the city charter to make it a law that they can't, you know, that certain things have to happen. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night and thinking, I wonder if we could do public financing in the city of Boulder. And so we met that Saturday, and I kind of brought it up and thought, well, people are going to, you know, say, Sue, it'll never happen. And we designed it so that, in fact, we do have public financing, and it passed with over 60% of the vote. So that was exciting. I mean, you know, and now there's a bill before before Congress called the Fair Elections Now Act, which is very similar to what we're doing in Boulder right now. So that's exciting. I think that's kind of my baby. Then I guess the other thing was that on a negative side, we had a position that said that we wanted the mayor to be elected from within the city council, and that we wanted all the city council members to be elected at large. And that's a position that we have. Well, several years ago, a group, excuse me, of people wanted to elect the mayor, have the people elect the mayor, and they wanted to divide the city into districts and have each city council member run by district. So I immediately thought, wait a minute, we've got a position that speaks against this right away. So I went to the board and I said, can we take, I know we don't usually take a position until it's actually on the ballot, but can we speak against it as a league right now? And the board agreed that there was no way we couldn't speak against it because we had this ironclad position, essentially. So we formed a committee, not just the league, but several league members, and then members from the community that were on, and we called it One Boulder. And we came out against this proposal to divide the city into districts and elect the mayor. And it failed, so we were victorious on that also. So those were my two kind of exciting things, I'd say, here in Boulder. And then I guess the other thing that I have been involved in, and I started right away, is one of the reasons we moved to Boulder was we wanted to be able to walk everywhere or have good transportation. I didn't want to be dependent on a car. And so the league had a transportation committee. We called it an alternative modes committee. And something came up on the ballot early on when I was here, and I think I was on the board. And the transportation committee, or this alternative modes committee, didn't respond to tell the board how they thought we should, you know, proceed on this ballot issue. And so I thought, well, we need to reinvigorate that transportation committee. So I ended up chairing that committee. Then I realized that the money was coming from the state. So I thought, well, we need to have a state transportation committee too. So I did that. So I'm kind of trying to back out of all this now. But those are kind of the things I think that you know, were big in my life in the league here. So.
Well, you give an amazing picture of a kind of advocacy and activism that is very much part of sort of almost the democratic process, but almost also like really, you know, engaging government and citizens, right, and bringing that together. Mm-hmm.
Well, and it's interesting because, you know, people would say to me on occasion, you know, you really should run for city council. And I'm thinking, as I thought about it, I thought, I don't want to be on city council. I really can do more on the outside than I could on the inside. So it's worked out very well. So it's been very successful, I'd say.
Right, you don't have a constituency
right,
that you exactly have to answer to
right,
all the
exactly,
time, right?
Exactly.
Since you spoke about these two issues that really engaged you, could you talk about maybe some other issues that you're aware of that have been the focus since 1992 of the League?
Oh boy.
Not that you necessarily were involved
right.
in, but some other important things, just to give a picture of.
Well, one
Boulder's
of the interesting
concerns.
ones, I think, that I was actually, and it's interesting, I guess, because I was not on the board at the time, and there was an initiative called annexation by vote, And I was very much involved in that, not as a league member, but as just an individual citizen. And I really wanted the league to endorse it. I thought we could, and instead, and I thought, well, if they don't, even if they don't endorse it, maybe they will just take no position. And instead, they opposed it, and I was just heartbroken. But again, you know, they based it. They could say this is why we're doing this based on these positions or the positions we don't have. That, well, you know, that we just can't endorse it. In fact, we have to oppose it. So that was a case where I was a league member, but, you know, they didn't do, you know, what I thought should be done.
Could you explain a little about annexation by vote?
Oh boy. It was basically, we were worried about pieces of property on the outskirts of the city that could have been annexed, and we thought it would create more traffic and so forth. And so we wanted to be sure that the citizens really wanted to annex that there would be a lot of impact on libraries and on roads and on transportation and water and sewer and the whole thing. And so we thought that it was important. There weren't that many pieces of land, but we thought it was important that the city, that the voters have a chance to have a say in whether that land, particular parcel, got annexed or not. And it didn't pass, so we'll see.
Right, well, you know, I guess because Boulder has a comprehensive plan.
Right.
That planning is very much an occupation of citizens of Boulder that want to get involved with it.
Right, yeah, yeah.
Now, you are past president. Can you give us some insights into what it meant to be president of the league?
Well, I really need to compare it because I had also been president of the Fairfax League.
Well, that's good.
And so, but that was in the mid-'80s when there was no, at least I certainly didn't have email. And I remember I spent 2 years, and our years were two-year terms at that point, and I spent 2 years on the telephone, just constantly. And we, at that point, had 2 teenagers at home and so forth. And I mean, it's a wonder my marriage survived. And Fairfax County is big. We were living down near Mount Vernon, and Reston, which is way up kind of to the northwest, was still part of Fairfax County. So I put a lot of miles on the car those 2 years. But it was constant. When I got here, I really, I guess I had gotten burned out from being president of the Fairfax League. And so I said, no way am I going to do that. So it took me a long time to agree to do it.
And what were the years when you were president?
Here, oh gosh. Oh, I'm not good on years. Let me think.
Was it after 2000?
Oh, yes, it was. Let me think. Yes, let me think.
That's okay.
It ended, this is 2011. I think it ended in 2009.
Oh, wow. So
I
it's
think
very
8
recent.
or 9. Yeah, I'm trying to remember it because 2 people have come in since I did. Now with email, it's changed the world as far as communicating with people. The phone rarely rang. It was all email. You could communicate with the whole board. You know, with a flip. It was just fantastic. And it was, it was a much easier job, just because of email, I decided. And everybody, I mean, the board, usually a league board, if people agree to be on that board, there are very few people that don't do their job, kind of thing. So it's wonderful. You can, if somebody says they'll do something, you know that it's going to get done. And so being president, I think, is a relatively easy job. It's as long as you have people that are doing what they're supposed to do, they're more than, it's a wonderful group of people to work with, I guess. And it's one of the few groups, I guess, that I've been in that when people say they'll do something, they do it, and you don't have to keep calling and saying, are you checking up on them, kind of thing.
So that's really part of your organizational culture, is that very strong commitment to the service and to really the commitment to the league community.
Right. Right.
and to supporting each
and
other.
I think it's a certain group of people that the league applies or appeals to,
Mm-hmm.
and I think those people are the kind that if they say they'll do something, they do it, and so I don't know, it attracts a certain kind of person, and those are the people that agree to do things. So it's really wonderful. So.
Were there any special duties of the president? I know that you're talking about how you can see the difference in the amount of time you spent leading the group, but are there special things the president does that other people don't do, or?
Oh boy.
does that mean that you have to meet the press, or?
Yes, yeah.
Or you're like the public face of...
Right, I am. And in the league, only the president speaks for the league. So if the press calls somebody in the league, they hopefully will know enough to say, sorry, I can't speak to you, you need to call the president. And in fact, one of the times, it was right after I'd taken office, and it was right after this annexation by vote. What happened was that we had a speaker for the league did a forum on the annexation by vote, and they had already taken a position on it. And I wasn't on the board, but I thought, oh my gosh, they really shouldn't be doing this if they're trying to be nonpartisan or neutral kind of thing. They shouldn't, and they've already taken a position, but they did. And so it turned out that it was really, I thought it was embarrassing for the league, because several times one of the speakers on the other side would say, the league is opposing this initiative kind of thing, and here we were trying to run this neutral forum. So anyhow, the next year it turned out I was now the president, and it was the candidates forum, which the city council candidates forum that we do, and someone complained to the city manager that we shouldn't be doing the city council candidates forum because we weren't nonpartisan, we weren't neutral. And so I got this phone call from Frank Bruno, who was the city manager at the time, saying, Sue, you can't use the city council chambers for your candidates debate because you're not a nonpartisan thing. Well, it's very difficult for the public to understand that we do take positions on issues, but we don't on candidates. And so after several phone calls back and forth, he was very concerned about the fact that they were allowing the league to use their facilities. In fact, at one point I said, well, if we can't, and then he wanted us to pay, I don't know, $800 or something, and I said, well, I'm sorry, we just don't have the money for that. That's not, in our budget at all, and we just, we won't have the city council forum. And the city council member, and I guess I went to city council and explained our position on that to the council, and the council was up in arms. So I know I'd come up the stairs in the morning, and my husband would say, well, you're above the fold today. I thought, oh no. But then we finally reached an agreement that we basically would not ask any questions about any of the city council initiative or the ballot issues that had to do with the city, and no questions came up, so it was fine. And I did serve as a screener for the questions to be sure that none were asked and none so forth. So, but that was a little dicey, and I thought, oh my gosh, here I was on the other side of this issue, and now I'm having to defend the league. So that's the sort of thing. Does the president? Did you have to attend more meetings? I guess that at times you observe meetings. No, we didn't. And I think in the past they did have what they called an observer corps that would sit and go to city council and watch what was going on. Well, now it's on TV, and so you really don't even have to go. If you get Channel 8, you don't have to go to the meetings. And no, I really didn't. I think I did more as the transportation person for the league, going to on relationship to fast tracks and that kind of thing, than I did as the league president. So it wasn't bad at all. Now maybe it would be nice. Maybe we should have done more. But until an issue comes up, we can't manufacture an issue to do anything about. So. It was a relatively quiet 2 years.
And are there, can you give sort of an overall view of the kinds of issues that, just even from your Boulder and Fairfax view, the kinds of issues that engage the League more typically? You mentioned transportation.
Schools is certainly one.
Okay,
Natural
schools.
resources is one. Structure of government, I would call it, where we talk, I mean, for instance, where we had a position that said the city council should be elected at large and the mayor should be elected within the city council from the, by them, that kind of thing. So we have lots of positions on those, and also on county government. Now, the other thing, I guess, that happened during my term is, well, it happened in the term before mine, but then it actually took effect during my term, was originally we had been the Boulder Valley League, and Longmont had its own league. And for a long time, we always wanted to make it a county league so that lots of times we would do a study on like the structure of county government, and we'd go to them and say, we'd do a presentation to their group and say, do you agree with this, so that we can then have a position. Well, they got to the point, I think, where they really just didn't have the woman power to do what they wanted to do. And so 2 years before I took office, we merged the Longmont League and the Boulder Valley League to become the Boulder County League. And it was the best thing we ever did. Now we represent the whole county. And Longmont is getting more and more active, and it was a very good thing to do.
Well, you've given us, I think, a really good sort of personal view of what happens sometimes when you're in conflict and you agree to disagree, it sounds like, and people that are committed to the organization can be heard, but it doesn't necessarily lead to a splintering or that sort of thing.
No, it's because we know that they're not just talking off the top of their hats. They have a position that they're going back to and saying, this is why we took such and such an action. And that's what gives us the credibility. So,
so overall, would you say then that the League has a very positive view of government and government's role in the quality of life?
Yeah, I think we do, and that's in a way that's good, in a way it's not, because we really do. If you look at our positions, they really are supporting government policies, and we may not agree with the current policies, but what we're addressing is government policies and how government works, and we're not. That's really our primary focus is government, local, state, national government, and so. Anybody who really doesn't think or thinks that government is not, there's too much government or whatever, probably is not going to be happy in the League, I would think, because that's what our focus is government, to make it better and more effective and more responsive, but it is government. And we're not looking to do away with government, we're looking to make it more effective.
And meeting, for instance, with changing times, meeting new community needs or old community needs.
Right.
Because I was noting in the history that one of the issues, say in the 1940s and 1950s, was with the Department of Health.
Ah, yes.
And
okay.
golly, that just sounds very, very basic. And just looking at the community and what do we need to help our citizens. So that's what I was picking up on.
Yeah, interesting. And that's solid waste was another one that was before my time, but we were very much involved in getting the eco-cycle and the solid waste plant, I guess I'd call it, recycling center built and that kind of thing. So, and it was a committee, a solid waste committee that was involved in that. So it was.
So there are a lot of engagement here. Before I switch to some other things, I was going to just say, ask you about rather, bringing in new members.
Oh boy.
What is you described sort of maybe a more prototypical member that you might have, but in the roughly 20 years you've been here, how has the membership gone?
Well, I think we've maintained it, I would say.
Wow.
But the membership is getting older, and if you look at the demographics, people who I worked when I got out of college, but once I was married, I didn't work. And those were the women, and they're still in my age group, that continued on in the league. And because it was so intellectually stimulating, I think it wasn't like sitting and playing bridge or eating bonbons. You felt like you were doing something constructive to do, and it was intellectually challenging. But in this day and age, when women especially, get out of college and get, they both, husband and wife, work. And so, if that had been my case, I probably wouldn't have gotten into the league, to tell you the truth. I would have been exhausted when I got home from work, and if you have a family to deal with and so forth, outside activities just are not in the cards. So it's been very difficult, I would say, for us to get younger members. Every time somebody young comes in, we all kind of cheer and say, what can we do to keep this person? But I can understand. When we've looked at the university with the students there, thinking, maybe there were, we could do something with them, and we have a student membership rate and that kind of thing. But I remember being in college, and I just didn't have time for any outside activities particularly. So who knows? But I'd say that's one of our problems. And we've had wonderful we'd call them membership chairmen, who deal with that. And any suggestion that we get from national on how to encourage members, that person, those people do. And our board has spent a lot of time talking about it. But in the end, it's difficult, I would say. So we'll see. I have my fingers crossed that the league can continue.
Looking at demographics, a person has suggested to me that newly retired.
That's exactly where we're
people.
getting. That's exactly where we're getting people. Right.
And that might be just fine if they can be in the league with people living longer, maybe.
Right. Yeah.
For 20 years.
And that is
something.
who we're getting. If we get anybody, that's who we're getting. Right. So we'll see. Membership is not my thing, I guess. I always admire the people who agree to be the membership chairman, because I think it's kind of, they do all this work and then, with very little success, kind of, and I think, oh gosh, I think I'd be very discouraged. So.
Well, you're a shining model to a lot of people, I am sure. Could you say a little about the structure of the organization in regards to the fact that it is federal, state, and or a national, state, and local, which points to sort of a very highly evolved, very complex organization, and how all those different segments interact with each other.
Well, again, it's back to the grassroots. Program planning is where it all begins. And I've always told new people that come, they really need to go to a program planning meeting, because they're going to leave there and say, their head is going to be spinning because of all the topics that we talk about and bring up and so forth. But that's where everything begins, is at the local level, at program planning. And and so what happens is every other year, this year it's state and local program planning. Next year it'll be local and national program planning. And these ideas come from the grassroots, from the individual members. Now, lots of times now with email, we're lobbying. We may be lobbying, all over the country for things. But state leagues and local leagues, we have email addresses, so we can do that. And we couldn't do that back in the 80s and the 70s. So, but now it comes basically up from the grassroots. And if there are enough people want, like immigration was one that I remember back in the 80s, we were talking about at National Convention, and the only people that were interested were New Mexico and Arizona, kind of thing. Well, suddenly, it took hold, and we adopted an immigration study back. I'm trying to think if I was at that convention. I'm trying to, anyhow, but like maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and we now have a position on immigration. So, but it's come up through the grassroots, kind of, and up, lots of times it takes a lot of time for it to, finally sink in that we really need that position, and it happens. So that's at the national level, and the same thing happens at the state level, and then it gets adopted at a national convention or a state convention, kind of thing. But it's come from the individual members and the individual local leagues, and that's how it really begins. So it's really, as I said, it's a grassroots organization, and it really does come.
And
yeah.
It sounds like ideas can be formulated, but that you need at times to have patience and persistence.
Well, and now I think with email, you can lobby other leagues saying this is, and you come up with a proposal of what the study will be about, what it'll include and that kind of thing. You don't come to a position at that point. You're just talking about what you want to study. And then from that study, evolve the positions. So, but, now we can, we did, in fact, we lobbied, our league now has what we call a publicly financed campaigns committee, which I'm on, and we decided we wanted the National League to take action on the Fair Elections Now Act, which is publicly financed campaigns. And so we had email addresses for all the local leagues, and we could email them and say, all right, they're doing, they call it an advocacy agenda, I believe, in late January. And last year, we emailed all the local leagues and said, we think that the National League should put this as an action priority for them. I mean, everything you talk about, everything goes back to money. It really does. It's awful. But that's where it all starts. And if you can't control the money going into elections, it's, that everything just revolves around that. So it turned out a lot of local leagues felt, and state leagues felt the same way, and our state league was very supportive of it also. And it got more, I won't call them votes, but more suggestions to the National League for advocacy for this past year than anything else that came in. Well, the National League was involved in the Disclose Act based on the Citizens United case, and so they really didn't want to take it. They put it into their they were forced to put it into their advocacy agenda, but they really didn't do anything with it. So it's just one of those things you have to lobby
and be persistent, right? And continue with that work. Okay, well, that's a very interesting view of how the organization works, and that even at the local level, you're also thinking big.
Right, yeah. And it doesn't happen very often. I think that's about the only time I can think where we really wanted to lobby the National League on things. But that was something that, our local league really was very strong on publicly financed campaigns, but we have a history of it. And based on our Boulder initiative and the state and so forth. And so, we were, but other people feel the same way. Just, they just don't necessarily have the laws in place, kind of. So we'll see.
Just an observation as you talk about the communication revolution. It almost seems as though that definitely enhances sort of grassroots work by creating, like connections with other local leagues and then
well, interestingly enough, the first national convention I ever went to, I was president of the Fairfax League, and it was in Detroit, and it was in the 80s. And just before we left for convention, we got something from the National League that said they had done a long-range plan, and they basically wanted to put a lot of power at the national level. And our board at the Fairfax level just hit the ceiling. And so we basically I mean, and this is before email, so we, we said, well, we wonder if any other leagues feel the same way. So we thought, well, at the national convention we would have a caucus. Anybody can have a caucus, and you just write ahead and get a room, and you can have a caucus. So we set up this caucus on the National League's long-range plan. Our local league did, and we made buttons that have roots on them that are grass roots and that kind of thing. And,
oh my goodness.
And we thought, well, we're probably the only ones. Well, the room just overflowed, and we had to get a bigger room and a bigger room and a bigger room. I mean, we kept having caucuses during the whole convention, kind of thing. And finally, the group in the Washington, D.C. area said, we don't trust this national board. Maybe we better start monitoring since we live right in the area. So for a while, several of us would go in and just sit in on the national board meetings, which were really very boring. So it didn't last very long. But we just couldn't figure out why they had such a different feeling at the national, I mean, they're league members all over the country, but why are they, once they get to the national level, do they, just feel so differently? So I'm still not sure, really.
But
so,
you certainly sent a message,
right, we
huh?
did, yes, exactly.
Wow, that's a great picture of the organization. Another question that I'm sure people maybe have asked you, but what has been and is the significance of the League as a women's organization? And I know you do allow men in.
Right.
But I'm sure the predominance of your membership is
right.
women.
Well, it certainly goes back to 1920 with I'm losing my
Carrie Chapman Catt?
Yeah, right, and also giving the whichever amendment,
the
was, 19th Amendment, thank you, suddenly allowing people to vote, and from that group, the League, that's where the League was formed, and so it was women that wanted to be able to vote, and it just kind of evolved, I think, from that, that it was, men had ways of lobbying and that kind of thing, and women needed a voice. And this was a way to give them a voice, and it's continued. So,
do you think that women still need a platform for their voice?
As women, they probably do to some extent. Although I'm not so sure. I mean, we're pretty much integrated into the society, into the elected. Thing. Although, we certainly don't have as many elected officials as there are men. So, but I'm not sure the League can really take credit for that either. So it's, I'm just not sure.
Looking at Boulder, and I'm not sure if you could note this from the 1990s on, but what role did the League play in relation to women's participation in the political process?
Well, I think I noticed your notes. You're aware of that tape that Linda Jorgensen did with Ruth Carell and Janet Roberts, which I just love. I mean, everybody should have to see that tape. It is just wonderful, and their whole attitude in that tape is just wonderful. And I think the League basically. It helps you develop leadership skills, I would say. That I think when I started out in the Fairfax League, I was shy and kind of sitting there listening and so forth. And as I did more and more things, I became, more sure of myself, I guess. And then when I became president, I think I realized that, I did have power and I could, get thoughts across and so forth, and that the Board of County Commissioners, they were supervisors there, would listen if I spoke in for the League and that kind of thing. So I guess it's a wonderful way to develop self-confidence, I would say. So and part of it is just growing up, but part of it is also just the league experience. So,
can you point to anything formally or even informally that you've picked up on that League members do for each other to foster that leadership and leadership, I don't know, qualities of leadership and the skills of leadership, aside from, say, self-confidence through experience?
I think just, well, I'm trying to think.
Is there any active mentoring, that sort of thing?
Not really. I don't think of anything like that where it's, I mean, we certainly bring people onto we try not to bring people too quickly onto the board. That the league is kind of, the way we operate is a little overwhelming to people when they first get into the league with all our jargon and that kind of thing. But I think gradually, I think you do. So I guess, I started out just going to unit meetings in Fairfax, and then somebody said, well, you're home all day, could you just collect the candidates' questionnaires kind of from the people and keep track of them? Well, it turned out there were 75 of them. It was the whole Northern Virginia area, and I thought, oh my gosh. But that's kind of how I started, and then I became a voter service co-chair and so forth. So it's a gradual thing, I guess, that you develop over the years. So it's
and then it just depends on the openness of the individual to taking on more and more.
Right, yeah.
But it also sounds like the organization has to have the openings.
They do,
that, or the desire, to pull people, pull other women through.
Well, and with our, it's the aging of the league, really, and that's what's, I think, difficult, is because unless we get early, retirees and that kind of thing, it's going to be difficult as people get older. They're just not going to want to, they don't have the energy to do, what we did as, in the younger women. So we'll keep our fingers crossed.
Another thing, just observations of either the league's past history or, kind of the more recent past. Some people have said, like Janet Roberts and
Ruth Carell,
right? That the league prepared women in some ways for public office. So it became sort of an entryway into
I think it
politics.
did for some people. In fact, in Fairfax, the two league presidents that came before me did both run for the Board of Supervisors. And in fact, the chairman of the Board of Supervisors, and I remember when I had just taken over as president, and the chairman of the Board of Supervisors, who was a man, happened to get on the elevator with me, and I introduced myself and said I was the president of the league, and then I said, I have no desire to take your, to run against you in office. So, but, I think if people are inclined that way, it certainly is a very good way. You learn about what's going on in the community and what's happening, and you're knowledgeable about a lot of things in the that are going on. So it's probably a good lead-in to elected office if you want to do that. So
and maybe it played that role more so maybe in the past.
Yeah, I don't know of anybody
when things just weren't open.
Right.
Really, for women.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Would you say that the Boulder League has also women that are appointed to boards or agree
they used to be
serve on a lot of county and
they used to be, and
boards?
I don't think we're as again, it's the age, I think, of the members. I think in the past it was a younger membership, and they were more active, and they were more willing to go to evening meetings and that kind of thing, and we're not as much now as we did, I think, in the past. So,
going into sort of outside of the organization now to the Boulder community, how has the league sort of interfaced with the community and with government entities? Do you have any observations about the nature of that interaction and the quality of that interaction? Because you're definitely in the community.
You're
quite
right.
a bit.
Yeah, it depends again on the individual member's interest. For instance, we do have a member right now that's very interested in the parenting program in the school district, the Boulder Valley School District and St. Vrain. And she and a group of her friends, I mean, they're league members, have gotten interested in that and are really pushing to get more child care in the parenting classes and that kind of thing, especially in St. Vrain. So, it depends on the individual's interests on what they want to get involved in. I was very involved in transportation, so I served on a lot of the county committees and that kind of thing on transportation. So,
tremendous visibility. Do you find that the Boulder community has that gives the league a lot of credence and respect, and
I think the voters do on candidates forum. They feel that we're very fair and so forth, and so they can trust whatever, if there's a forum that they don't feel somebody's going to get blindsided at a forum, that kind of thing, or on ballot issues that we give both pros and cons. I think that right now is our strength, probably, is for the voters and for the individual citizens.
Is in the realm of almost citizen education.
Right, right.
And performing this marvelous role that you can meet the candidates
right.
in an environment where people feel respected and actually safe.
Yeah.
Okay. I was wondering, are there any examples that just pop into your mind about interacting with city government?
I'm trying to think. Well, we certainly had a good relationship with Elisa Lewis, the City of Boulder clerk. She was very helpful on our campaign finance initiative, and then afterwards she would meet with us to talk about changes or modifications that should be made, and did we approve, and that kind of thing. So I'd say it was more that kind of thing than, and then transportation and testifying before, say, the Transportation Advisory Board in the city, that kind of thing on concerns. So, I mean, to some, again, it depends on whether, we have interest in a particular thing. Like probably back in the 70s when the health department might have been a problem, there might have been people in the league that were very interested in that. And so, it depends on what the interests of the members are, really, I'd say.
Well, it just from all your descriptions, though, it just sounds like there's a tremendous interplay between the public and the government and the League of Women Voters, and the League of Women Voters is trying to really participate.
Right, yeah, I think so.
Offer.
Yeah, and there certainly was even more so, I think, in several years ago. So again, it depends on the members and if they're willing to take action.
What do you think have been some of the most important accomplishments of the league?
In Boulder?
Just in Boulder, in your 20 years
Oh,
here.
gosh.
I mean, you've mentioned some.
Right, yeah, I think, well, and it's my personal opinion, I think, because I was so involved in those. So certainly campaign finance was one. Interestingly enough, when you do a petition drive, you meet people, and we get more members, or a lot of members, not a lot, but we get members from that petition drive. If you're down at the farmer's market and somebody will say, oh, I've been meaning to join the league. And then, I had a separate sheet of paper that I just kept names and addresses and phone numbers on of people that were interested in the league. So it's getting the league out in the public, really. We're kind of hidden unless and we don't do that much testifying, really, before city council or boards and commissions, that kind of thing. So it's more kind of getting, that's kind of how we've gotten members, I'd say. And I can't remember what your question was.
Well, just some of the outstanding accomplishments.
Okay, yeah.
However you want to interpret that.
Okay.
You know, and it
Yeah.
sounds like getting citizen involvement.
Well,
is one of
certainly
them.
to me, action. I mean, you know, if there's anything that is active, you know, that we can get involved in, I think, I mean, the One Boulder was certainly one, and campaign finance was another that you know, as long as it fits within our purview, we need to be out there speaking one way or the other.
Right now, we're coming to the end of the tape.
Good.
So, are there, well, this could be the end of the interview, or we can continue, but how do you feel about that? Would you like to say more?
No, I think you've kind of gotten the flavor of my league experience, so I think it's kind of been interesting to go, you know, to come have to have been in 2 leagues and realize that they're really not so different. So it's kind of nice to know you can. In fact, that was when we decided to move to Boulder. That was one of the criteria. There had to be a League of Women Voters. So.
Now that you're going to move on,
well, it's a way to, you know, it's a way to get, to meet people in the community that have similar interests to, you know, to yours, and so it was a natural fit. So it worked very well.
We're very grateful for your activism. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.